why did I choose science? I was born in South Africa and grew up in Zimbabwe, this great country kind of in the southern tip of Africa. And my dad was a geologist, so travelled around the country a lot. My mum's actually a computer programmer, and we had a really great time. But we moved to England, and we lived half in Zim, half in England for a long time. And when I'd go back to Zim, sometimes people had died, which never happened, obviously. When I went back to England, everyone was still alive, because in my mind, no one dies in England. This was happening, and I was learning a lot of things about kind of diseases in Zimbabwe. The one I was most scared of is this cool parasite called bilharzia, and as my dad used to say, it makes you lazy, which I thought was just the worst thing that could happen.
So that's one.
Schistosomiasis. Yeah, thanks. Anyway, so I went on a school trip when I was 7 years old, and this is why I think getting kids out to see what scientists actually do is so important. We went to Novartis, which is a pharmaceutical company, and they showed me a yew branch, that's the tree there, and said that you can make cancer cures from that. I mean, the idea that all around us, in every plant, every natural thing, there might be a cure for all of the diseases that we have. I mean, to me, that's conservation is required and more research. And the best thing I saw that day was an electron microscope. I also saw a PCR machine that took up a whole room that now is about this big. But the electron microscope really got me. We looked at sugar cubes, and I always wanted to have a go on one. So I did my undergrad in the UK and became a scientist, started working in malaria, and I heard about Brendan. And Brendan was, I was a research assistant, and I was told that Brendan was really supportive of young people in his lab, and he really gave you the opportunity to control your projects and supported you to become a scientist. So I emailed him and I hassled him for a year until we had that phone call.
Great assistant.
Yeah. And eventually he gave me a job, and I moved out here. It was actually when it was going to be the Austin, but then so I got an email saying it was in Heidelberg. I was like, what? I'm moving to Melbourne to go back to Heidelberg in Germany. Anyway, turns out it's a different Heidelberg. And the Burnet is a really, really special place. Before this, I worked in the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and they're both focused on poor and disadvantaged communities around the world. They're both focused on neglected diseases to some extent, neglected populations, and it's a really inspiring place to work where people care about what they do for the people they're doing it for, not just for your own glory. It's really about making a difference. So I studied malaria. I just thought I'd better put something up about malaria. There's all these preventions, so there's insecticide-treated bed nets, and just the use of those without all the new drugs that we're trying to develop and vaccines, just simple use of something like that can reduce malaria by half. There's indoor residual spraying, that's using DDT. Nowadays there's insecticide resistance is coming, so the mosquitoes don't die when you spray them to the same extent. So that one's going down the wall. The gin and tonic at the bottom, quinine and tonic water, it's a good one if you're travelling. And this is a poster my granddad actually got when he was a prisoner of war in Japan, and when he was let out, this is the poster they got on the way back to Sri Lanka about, looking after yourself from malaria was seen as such a big deal because it's a kind of patriotic duty to not get malaria. And now we have drugs and insecticides and things like that, but the mosquito and the parasite are constantly developing resistance against these, so we need more research to combat that and hopefully one day make a vaccine. So at the Burnet we have from the field work where we use policy, really decent research into what policies work. We also do basic research. So this is a picture of a malaria parasite. The colourful picture is some of the is with one of the microscopes we bought with donor support at the Burnet. It allows us to look at really in-depth detail about different protein-protein interactions that hopefully one day we can make a drug using this kind of information. And on the other side, I just thought I'd put this in. This is a couple of years ago, I finally got to use an electron microscope. So this is with one of my genetic knockouts, looking at, that's an infected red blood cell, and the little lumps on the surface are what allows that red blood cell, when it's infected by a parasite, to stick in our brain. That's what can cause coma and death. We're talking about women in science, but I think also there's a broad question about science and leadership. And it comes down to money. Every evidence-based decision, every decision I think that's spent with public money should be based on evidence. Otherwise, you're just throwing your money away. If you don't have the evidence, then your research, whatever you're doing, whatever your public policy is, you should have inbuilt into that research to see if it does work. Now, women in science, I did not know about Ruby Payne-Scott until 2 weeks ago at the Women in STEM, and so I thought I'd put her up here. These are some of the amazing women that have come before, who have done some really fascinating, decent work. And just think, they're just the tip of the iceberg, because so few women were given the opportunity to really become scientists and to make their mark. And who knows what else Ruby could have done had she been able to stay in science. Now, these are more tangible examples of where not having women in science has actually made a really bad effect on the world. And this is very tangible, but a lot of the other things that we're talking about are less so. Crash test dummies. The first crash test dummies are all based on men. They don't have breasts, so basically a lot of women died in very low speed crashes because their breast would hit the steering wheel and then they died. So just not having any women on the developing committee or whatever it was for crash test dummies resulted in these deaths. And we've got heart attacks. The signs and symptoms for men and women differ for a heart attack. So a lot of women, they might go to hospital, but they'll get turned away. And so without that research on both men and women as subjects, we miss important differences. And then the last one there is thalidomide. There weren't many women in the original clinical trials, and then we know the terrible causes that happened. But this is still happening today. So I think that's 2006, 8 out of 10 drugs that had to be removed from licensing in the US were due to issues that hadn't been seen in women because women hadn't been involved in those clinical trials. So there's a more tangible examples, but I think the biggest issue is that we're just losing different minds, we're losing different viewpoints on how life might happen, different ways of thinking. I've been very involved in this and been very interested in how to become a better scientist, how to lead. I have all the same issues that most other women do. I kind of have quite low self-confidence. I doubt my own abilities. I do have some amazing mentor women at the Burnett, which has been great. But then I saw this opportunity advertised to apply for this 3-week intensive leadership and strategic planning trip to Antarctica. So it's really intensive. It's actually not 3 weeks. It turns out it's 2 years, but just 3 weeks in Antarctica. So I've been doing a lot of self-reflection these days. I'm one of 78 women from around the world, and we are going to Antarctica. All together, we're going to try and make a really strong network. It goes from, there's one undergraduate woman, and it's up to professors and deans, and women who are in science-related. They previously had science degrees, but some of them may have left academia or industry and be doing something associated. And the idea is to give us more skills to lead groups to solve complex problems, because that's another thing. It's been shown that groups with women in are better able to solve really complex problems. And it's in Antarctica because climate change is one of the biggest complex problems we have currently. So it's more of a backdrop for it. And I hope for myself that it will give me the skills and the network of women, because this is going to run over 10 years, so there'll be 1,000 women going through it in total. I hope that it will enable me to be more effective at bringing better health outcomes to the rest of the world. Yeah, it's called Homeward Bound. That's what I'm currently up to. I really value being at the Burnett for having the support to put myself out there and try and go for these to make a difference. Thanks.